5 years to get to the point where you're respected and recognized and truly good at it. But the time's gonna pass anyway, so who cares? So put as much pressure on yourself as you possibly can and turn the heat up and watch what you become. You can be at your most awkward, your most terrified, your least purposed and least productive right now, because the world expects something out of you for the first time in your life. And if you're not delivering, you feel crushed by that weight. And the astrologer comes up to him one day and he says, in 7 days, one of the women of court is going to die. 7 days later, one of King Philip XI's court women passes. He meets with his other advisors and he says, man, either he's so powerful that he made it happen, or he's so treacherous that he poisoned her. Or either way, this guy's got to go.
Welcome to episode 10 of Expanding Local. Today I'm here with Burton. He was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. He started as a plumber through his family connections and was then promoted to ops manager of Benjamin Franklin Plumbing of Lancaster and then Mr. Sparky Electric in Lancaster. Then, about a year and a half ago, he left there and he now serves as the general manager of Benjamin Franklin Plumbing in Phoenix, Arizona. And he is the host of the award-winning Waste No Day podcast.
Award-winning Waste No Day. What's up?
And
here's the award, by the way. It's a Stanley Thermos.
And now he uses his years of experience to train the next generation. Brian, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm sure you could do a better job of introducing yourself than I just did. So the floor is yours.
No, sir. There's a reason my co-host does that on Waste No Days, because he's good at it and I'm not. So great job you did there, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was one thing kind of missed in there. I would say that I went from ops manager of Ben Franklin and ops manager of Mr. Sparky to move to vice president of sales of the 1 hour Ben Franklin and Mr. Sparky, and then had operations managers for each one reporting to me. And the reason for that was operations is not my strong suit. Details it's just not me. And what we had come up with was that if I'm just fully focused on driving revenue, building the techs, building the team, then everybody's going to be in a happier position and make more money ultimately. So the operations managers did what they're good at, and I focused on the primary thing I'm good at, which is revenue production.
Perfect. So when I was in the trades, I don't want to talk down on anyone, but there were a lot of people who it kind of seemed like they were miserable and in the same spot. Their bodies are starting to wear down. They didn't really set themselves up for success. And it seems like you kind of ascended through, I don't want to call it the corporate ladder, but you just ascended through life and kind of made positions for yourself. How did you go to that point? Or like, how did you go through the mindset shift to be able to do that? And what have you learned along the way?
In 2004, I got a really good mentor in Las Vegas at a company that I first learned to sell and communicate, and that there was this whole other side of it. And my mentor and I, Lance Fernandez, we flew to Scottsdale here where I live now, and attended Tom Hopkins, who they call the godfather of selling. He was an influence for every sales trainer you've ever heard of, like Grant Cardone and Andy Elliott and all those guys. We flew out to his sales training boot camp, and I was hooked from there, like kind of understanding, one, that little changes in my face or my hands or the tone of my voice, and pausing and nodding and smiling and these kind of things could change the way the message that I'm giving is being received. Not only did I fall in love with what this gave me the ability to do with sales, because I'm a third generation plumber, right? So I was already a plumber when I got there. If I recommended something, it was something that needed to be done. And so when I'm training technicians and even salespeople in the home services, whatever the home service is, doesn't have to be plumbing, but even if it's solar, and I'm training some solar reps, I'm just like, I start on the foot of if you're telling people they need it, they do. So I just naturally assume that's the case with everybody. Probably a mistake on my part. But I always assume if you're in the home services, you're there because you want to serve. Like, of course, we want to make money. I'll never fault anybody for that. And I'm very upfront about that. If I lace up the work boots and leave my family in the morning, I'm going to get paid. I can't tell you one time I went and did it for free on a Sunday, right? So yes, I love to serve. I love the home services, but I did it to get paid. So, but if I walk through a house and maybe somebody just moved in and they say, yeah, check all the faucets, the toilets, the water heater, all that stuff. And I saw that 2 toilets could use, replacement and one was in great condition. I wouldn't say replace all 3 toilets. I would say, let's go ahead and upgrade these 2. That one's fine. And that's not something to worry about. So I just assume like everybody's like that. So all it really afforded me was the ability to go from maybe converting 45% of what I recommended to converting 80, 90% of what I was recommending. So I just doubled my pay by using my voice differently and using my hands a little differently and my body language. I mean, the words too, obviously, but it's probably the least important part of it because you can deliver with proper body language and tonality and facial expressions. You can deliver something. You can do a pretty crummy job of explaining it and still sell well just on charisma alone. So I didn't just fall in love with the ability to make more money and make more sales and kind of climb the ladder of revenue producers on that team. I fell in love, unlike most people who were at those seminars back then, with the people on stage affecting people like me for a living. So kind of subconsciously and a little consciously, every move I've made from that day in probably 2005, so 20 years ago, is almost quietly knowing that I'm heading in a direction of, well, what we did this past November in 2024 was the first ever Waste No Day boot camp. And it was modeled exactly after Tom Hopkins sales boot camp. In fact, I told people there, if Tom Hopkins was still doing his boot camp, you wouldn't be here because I would have just told everybody to go there and I'll see you there. Like I'll be in the audience. And, I finally got to fulfill that dream. And then we did another one here recently and we'll do the next one in May. And it's just me on stage kind of training what I've learned over the years. So I would say if ascending the ladder almost sounds too easy compared to what it actually was, which is like a fingernails breaking off, clawing at a concrete wall, trying to get up that ladder. Because as we had talked about, you and I before, I'm not a high school graduate. I'm a high school dropout. I got my GED in rehab when I was 32 years old. Already had 2 kids at the time, like by my own doing, certainly, and by my upbringing. None of this has been the slightest bit easy. It has all been pulling teeth to get to every next level. But at the same time, one of probably my greatest mentor ever was Brian Tracy, even though I've only met him physically once and then a second time on Zoom when he did our podcast. And he had this saying, and I was talking to some technicians about this morning. Fortunately, because of Brian Tracy, I got this code to live by, where he said, it may take you 5 years of being broke and unknown and bad at your job, 5 years, to get to the point where you're respected and recognized and truly, truly good at it. But the time's going to pass anyway. So who cares? So put as much pressure on yourself as you possibly can and turn the heat up and watch what you become. And I love Jordan Peterson lately because it seems like he's really taken this conversation to the next level. He has a quote where he said, what What if the true meaning of life is to find the biggest burden you can possibly bear and then bear it? And, we're such goal-oriented beings that we're truly only fulfilled when there's a worthwhile, fantastic, rewarding goal at the end of the track that we can just barely see, and we're putting everything into it. When we get the goal, it's nothing. Like, it doesn't do anything for it. Like, Steve Weatherford is a famous NFL player who, and dozens of NFL players have said this. He was on the Giants team that won the Super Bowl against Brady. So they not only won the Super Bowl, but they took it from the Super Bowl GOAT himself. Like, nobody has more rings than that guy, and they took one. And he said Monday morning was the most depressing day of literally his entire life. He almost killed himself.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Steve Weatherford. Great story. And the way to look at that is, unfortunately, is like the attainment of the goal that your listeners or our friends listening are seeking. It's actually never going to be fulfilling. The most fulfilling part for me in every goal that I've set and achieved on this road to setting more goals, essentially, the most fulfilling part I find every time is when I'm almost there. Like, I can smell that goal. I'm so close. And then all of your faculties go into it 100%. And you're like extravascular. You're so like, I can taste this goal. I'm all over this. But man, the second you get it, boom, you have to jump right back into the next goal. So what, you never heard about Tom Brady being depressed after a Super Bowl win.
I heard about it being depressed, not suicidal. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And why wasn't Brady as depressed as some of these NFL players? A lot of them literally call it the darkest day of their life is Super Bowl Monday. After they won, Tom Brady never experienced this like Steve Weatherford did to that level. And they asked him why, and he's talked about this dozens of times that I've heard. He said, well, I don't know. I guess I didn't have time because Monday morning after a Super Bowl win, guess where I was? He was in the game room watching film, trying to figure out why he wasn't perfect yesterday and how he can be better so he can win the Super Bowl this coming year. He's got the parade coming and everything, but he's like, yeah, we'll get there. I'm going to go watch some game film and figure out why I did not kill it, or how I could have done better. And it's literally all your faculties are engaged in this worthwhile goal. You hit that goal. If you expect the game to stop and you to feel like the ultimate winner and now we're good and we can relax, you're going to get hit with this wave of probably something like all your energy is dedicated to something and you're in like hunting mode, and all of a sudden like the game disappears, right? The deer goes out behind a cliff that you can't go down. Well, the adrenaline doesn't go anywhere. So it's almost, I feel like you turn inward and all that energy just goes inward and becomes, it can eat at some people and really pick them apart. And it can turn into anxiety and depression just very quickly. So you just need to refocus it. And for me, I honestly don't feel like I've done much yet. I feel like I have a long way to go. I never feel people congratulate me on where I've come from to where I'm at now. And I love it. I do appreciate it. But I truly, maybe it's imposter syndrome. I do suffer from that. But I don't feel like I've done much. I do celebrate the wins, whatever they are, but it's very quickly like on to the next one. What are we doing next? And then really, man, as many people that can come, like if I'm taking a journey that I know is great for me, I'm just trying to drag as many people along as humanly possible in some way, shape, or form, So it's like we could have done boot camps pay the bills for Waste No Day that have literally always been paid now out of my checking account. We've never taken a sponsor on Waste No Day. I don't want to say we never will, but at this point, that's how I feel. And the boot camp was a way to actually start paying some bills, but also grow the show, because I don't think people really understand, and you're going to get a taste of it here soon. And since we're only on episode 10, how actually expensive it is even to start a show is expensive. But when you really get into it and you want to physically grow it, and you're kind of past the point of word of mouth, like we hit kind of a ceiling where we're just not growing. And I think the reason for that is, without any kind of promotion, because we've never paid $1 for advertising or anything like that. Without promotion, the amount of people who are just kind of falling off and moving on to another show, which is a very natural thing. I mean, I've stopped listening to some shows that I really love just because I'm moving on to a new thing. It's right in step with the amount of people who are finding and getting on the show. Once you get to a certain point, however many downloads that is per month. And I feel like we hit that plateau. So if we're going to grow it, we need to get it in front of more eyes and ears quickly. And the days of me just writing checks to make these things happen and still being able to sleep in my wife's bed, probably behind me. So we did the boot camp to generate income so we can grow the show. And it's funny. It's like, people are like, well, how much is it? Like, what does it take? And I'm like, way more than a boot camp is going to do. It's just like, it's funny. Tommy Mello and I, Tommy's a partner in the show now.
Wow.
And we were having thank you. And we were having a conversation about a guy he hired that worked on Mr. Beast's team, building that. And Tommy was the one telling me, like, bro, you're never going to get this show where you want to get it without advertising. It's just not how it works. It's like, you've done a great job up to this point, but it's time to, like, you're going to have to put some money into the machine, and then let some advertising spit out. And then that's how you're going to grow. And he said that this guy told him that one thumbnail, like, the little picture on YouTube, like, you should click on this video because of this cool picture. They'll spend up to $2 million to create one thumbnail for a YouTube video. So when people are like, well, what's so expensive about average? I'm like, you have no idea. It's so impossible. I mean, nearly impossible to spend a few dollars that equates to new people actually downloading or press and play to stream a podcast. So many things have to, including employees, have to go into this thing. It's a real tough gig, but now this is the next goal. So the next goal is to get to this new certain number. And so I had the choice of, like, building an online course where I don't have to stand in front of people and train, because it takes a lot of time out of my schedule, takes a lot out of me. I'm actually like completely useless the Sunday after a Friday, Saturday boot camp. I'm literally spent. Like, I'm sitting there, my wife's talking to me the next morning after this past one we just did. She's like, I feel like I'm talking to myself. And I'm like looking forward with my mouth open. Like, I'm like, oh no, I heard you. And she was like, oh, okay, well, tell your face. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I'm just like, I'm spent. I have no words or something, So it takes a lot out of you to go to.
That means you're putting a lot of energy into your boot camp.
Yeah, and it's scheduled for 2 8-hour days back to back, just me on stage. And both days went 10 hours or the first day of both events went 10 hours because we get to that 8-hour mark and we're role playing like crazy. We're bringing people on stage. I'm getting them at their tables to stand and role play while I walk the room and give feedback. And I'm making them start over, and I'm changing their body language for them and showing them kind of how it looks from a second or third party perspective when you're standing there with your arms folded or your hands in your pockets because we're nervous, right? Well, if I just did the online training course, it would be a lot more money coming in and it would take a lot less of me. But I had this feeling that, like, I just felt like the impact on the actual people who spend dollars is going to be so much bigger if I can be there and make sure the training's received the way it's intended and make sure that they engage with it. Because you're not going to be at a boot camp and not engage with the training. You're not going to be there and not memorize certain things. You're coming up on stage. Hopefully nobody hears this that's coming to boot camp, because we don't promote that part so hard. But every person in the audience gets up on stage in front of everybody with a mic in their face and role plays. And we do roaring applauses, any win. We don't do any, we make fun of people, especially the electricians, because they deserve it. But we don't do, we don't rip anybody. We're not out to break people. I'm literally out to, and this is probably the biggest piece of gratitude I get every boot camp. I'm trying to get people who struggle to have a conversation one-on-one in a client's home, put them on a stage in front of dozens of their peers that they've never met with like a boom mic and a lighting system around them, like as uncomfortable as it can be, have them try and fail, miserably fail at role play, and then redo it until they nail it, get a huge applause, and realize throughout the whole process from start to finish of all the things that happened to me up here, I did not die. And I went through this over and over again until I nailed it. And now I know, if nothing else happened at boot camp, I know that I'm capable of exactly this. If I can do it here, man, doing it in front of a client that doesn't know what it's supposed to sound like, cakewalk.
So earlier you mentioned Jordan Peterson and like how he kind of recommends that you take on the biggest burden that you can possibly carry. I believe he's also the one that explains how you essentially have to like slay the dragon. Behind the dragon is the life you want, the goals you want. This kind of sounds like that. And I know public speaking and like what you just spoke about is a huge aspect of that. You're around a lot of trades technicians, people that are, working in the trades. What are other dragons that they need to slay, or the most common dragons?
Yeah. That's the big four, man. And it's written on my training board, on my whiteboard in my training room with our team right now. It's like, it's a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. And, but I still revisit it 2 to 4 times a year where hey, we just need to talk about this again. And I don't try to like get up and ever do finger wagging and like, you need to be better. Mostly what I do is talk about myself and the piles that I've stepped in and the mistakes that I've made based on addiction issues, based on boredom, a lack of a real purpose, based on my childhood and the traumas that didn't get dealt with. And oftentimes just based on laziness and other character flaws, I guess. And the big four that I think are real dragons that probably just about every technician is going to come up against are, and you could use broad language like procrastination, but like there are 4 things that I've seen take out more people with huge promising careers in front of them than anything else. It's women, it's drugs, it's alcohol, and it's video games. And I do mean video games. And I'll stop on that one because I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know what I mean by the other 3, although I'm happy to touch on those and the train wrecks I've made of life over the years based on that. But the video game one is a tricky one because unless you're spending 16 hours a day on it, you're not having somebody tell you, bro, you're an addict, like you need help. And it doesn't have the same side effects as some of these other ones. Like if you go home and drink for 8 straight hours after work and then you get up and go to work, you're going to be hungover. You're going to look like crap. You're going to smell like alcohol, right? You're not going to be allowed to drive. You'll probably get a DUI if you do. right? There are signs. If you go home and spend 12 hours playing Call of Duty, there aren't as big as signs, but if you watch, you can see it. The primary problem is with that. The biggest one that I'll see from like a GM perspective is this person who's addicted to video games gets around that 2-3 o'clock mark in the afternoon, which can be really the golden hour. Like people start to get home. So if you're running calls from 3 to 6, 3 to 7, you literally have the best chance of the day of selling. Also, it's when the big emergencies happen, when people get home from work. You get these people who get around that hour and they start getting that itch, that call to get back on the sticks. And, you know, I know this firsthand because like my youngest brother-in-law, my wife's youngest brother, he was a big video game guy. And he came to live with me and my wife while we made him a part runner and then a plumbing apprentice. And now he's a plumber and he's doing really well. Well, in the beginning, when he was just a part runner, he was itching to get home all the time. And I'm just like, bro, and I wouldn't see him. Like he'd get to my house and I would not see him until work the next day because he just have his headphones on and, you know, his gun and be looking in the TV screen and just talking to his boys. You could hear him downstairs like, oh, yeah. Well, one day, wife and kids weren't home and I came home with him and I said, bro, I'm going to check this thing out. I mean, I'm a gamer. Like I loved video games growing up. Really kept my brother and me out of being in Detroit too much. So we could just go home and play a video game. And I put the headphones on with him and got geared up or whatever. And the game turned on and we just dropped into this place or whatever. And there were all these other live players in there. And the celebration that happened as a result of him getting in this game where his team was like, oh, yeah, the tables have turned now, MFers, you know, like it's game on. Oh, yeah, Matthew's here, bro. And he's just, it's just like an insane level of skill. Like he's the first person I've ever seen that when he looks at the screen, he's not looking at the screen. He's looking through the crosshair. So he actually physically looks through the crosshair. So his eyes are following that thing the entire time. I saw it happen. So when he sees something, so if he sees your head, you're dead. Like he has to be dead before he sees your head. Because if he sees it, his crosshairs are on it and he pulls the trigger that fast. His code name was nickname or whatever, was Rorus Sniper. And he was just absolutely elite. And, you know, I was thinking about, and I'm like, yo, man, that was cool, man. Like, you're a beast, bro. Like, I went in there, I was just a meat sack. I mean, people did whatever they wanted to me, you know. I just got really good at respawning. So the celebration that occurred and the kudos that he got, I thought about it later on or maybe the next day. And, you know, it occurred to me, I'm like, in this world, he's the man. And he's built himself quite a reality in that world. And people are excited to see him. And he's a winner. And I'm like, yeah, no wonder. No wonder it's such a big deal. And I think it was Joe Rogan who asked Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson said at least 10% of the population will be taken out by alcohol. Now, do you think it's 10% in the trades? Got to be 20. Got to be double the average. And Joe Rogan said, why do you suppose that is? And Jordan said, are you serious? Have you ever tried it? It's because it's amazing. It's what it is. Especially if you're prone to anxiety, because alcohol alleviates it momentarily. Now it comes back significantly stronger later. It's not ridding you of it. It's pushing it down. And while it's being pushed down, it's growing. So days later, you get that rubber band snaps back. But so, yeah, just understood that his game reality was so much better than his real world. So I set on a mission to make his real world better than his game world, not by things I was going to do for him, because that wouldn't make it real, but by showing him a path in terms of his social skills, which, I mean, he'll tell you he had none. He literally didn't have any. And then his ability to kind of hang out with people and be a bro, and, you know, taught him to be somewhat self-sacrificing when it comes to the team as an apprentice, and carry that into when you're in your own truck, because you'll be shocked at how many things get overlooked when you're a guy who's there to help people. And, you know, he kind of learned these things, and all of a sudden he's getting celebrated at work, and he's playing video games less and less. But the real challenge there is, it's just all I know from a manager standpoint is I got a guy with no heavy burden responsibilities. Now, you might have a mortgage, but you don't have a spouse and kids, right? That has to get home earlier than everybody else every day. Also tends to be someone who's complaining about not making enough money, right? And what I see is, you know, where your focus is where your energy's going. So it's like, if you're a gamer and this is what you're trying to do all day, now you're trying to make money until about 1-2 o'clock. And all of a sudden you start checking out. Now, no difference in the potheads, been there too. No difference in the alcoholic, or even the guy who just, if I call you an alcoholic, you're getting all upset. But if you're not, give it up for 90 days and, you know, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
No difference.
Like, video games in general, is there a way to, like, play that in a way that's not, like, destructive or addictive?
Yeah. No question about it. My son is 17, and, like, he's got his first girlfriend now, and, like, he's not screwing around with video games anymore, thank God. But if he got into a game and thought I'd like it, and is like, this is what I want to do with our time together, I would put it on the calendar for Ethan and me to play a video game together. But here's the deal. It's going on the calendar, right? So it might be 2 days a week. I'll play an hour with him if we can make that happen. 6 to 7, 2 days a week when I don't have any podcasts to do. When the timer goes off, it's time to put it away. Now, I'm not like, hey, we're in the middle of a spawn and we got 14 guys left on the enemy side. Oh, we're taking these fools down. Yeah, I'm not giving up. Don't get me wrong. But we're not tacking on another hour and 20 minutes. It's like, when this round ends, we're done. That's the way. Now, here's the bigger thing. When that timer goes off, what are you doing next? So what's on the calendar next? It's so awesome that we have these little freaking computers in our pocket, and they have these calendars on them, that it's so easy to create a calendar task and drop it on there, and the calendar goes off 15 minutes before that task, and you just go, oh, that's right. Now from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., I get in front of my tablet with my pen and notepad, and I watch videos on overcoming objections, or I listen to Waste No Day's 7 Deadly Objections episode, or whomever, Andy Elliott, Jeremy Minor. And I start dissecting objections and figuring out what they mean and why I'm not able to overcome them. And I figure out how to get the nerves out, because some people are able to ask people to buy, and I really don't. I just push the options forward and pray, you know, and I got to figure these things out. So you just spend 7 to 8 with your notepad and your pen and maybe some videos or podcasts, figuring out how to get to the next level in your selling career, right? Maybe you're going to do marketing, right? So 7 to 8, I'm just going to sit with a pen and a notepad, and I'm going to figure out how to gain new clients. Not by watching videos necessarily, although it's probably not a bad idea, but I really want people coming up. Like, the best work I ever do is when I just go, I'm going to figure this out. Now imagine if everybody played the video games, and maybe it's 2 hours. I think that's the problem with the video game in a real sense is it's a very dopamine building and depleting thing. It's like what I noticed with watching Matthew play those games, and even me getting into it, man. I got in the little bit of time I played, I got decent. Well, I grew up a video gamer, so it's not a big stretch. Halo was my. You don't want to see me in Halo 1. You just don't want that. Don't do that to yourself. So, I got decent at it, and what I found was I had a blast. Like it was, if we'll call it fun, it was the most fun I had that day, maybe that week. Now what I was then, 35-year-old dude, maybe 38-year-old dude. I don't have a lot of time in my evenings for quote unquote fun stuff that I'm doing by myself. Like I had my childhood. I'm a grown up. I have a wife. I have 4 kids. I got a dog. I got 2 cats. I got multiple businesses that I'm part of. And I have all these young, broken, 20 years younger versions of me out there who have never heard of me, and I've never heard of them. And they're out there wandering around with no mission and no sense of purpose and nothing to look forward to in their life. And they're heading down this path of addiction or gangbanging or crime or just freaking depression, man, where you just close yourself out for some years. Pornography, whatever it is. And it's always like, man, I don't want to make a social media post. I cannot tell you how sick of social media I am. And both like being part of it, like it's all encompassing, everything to do with it. Like whether it's the politics or it's the people getting on there whose only sole purpose is to beat their chest and show you how much better they are than everybody else by calling out all these people that they're disappointed. It's just like, I can't take it anymore. I hate opening it. But then I just feel like there's some dude that's accidentally going to run across one of my videos that's going to end up listening to Waste No Day. That's going to be one of those 410 Apple podcast reviews we have that are like, you guys changed my life. Like you can read through them and it says like, I was bullied mercilessly in these trades. I hated it. And then I ran across Waste No Day and I have a new lease on life. Like you guys are my manager. I've never met these people, right? But that's why we call it in your passenger seat. Like we're in your passenger seat. Like let us roll with you, man. Like let us pump you up. Because I certainly know the pain of, it's pain. Like being in a service truck is painful. It sucks. It's like emotional turmoil all day. It's physical pain. You're beating the crap out of yourself. I have issues with my body, like my foot and my knee. I'll never recover from being in a service truck. The crappiest part is probably a good place to throw in. I should say it on our show too. I grabbed the back handle of the truck and I would spin around and jump off the back and land on my heel for years. That heel is annihilated now. And I never realized I was doing anything wrong. Like, it's just one of those things, But then you're always on your hands and knees in crawl spaces and attics and like you're underneath these sinks. And what I didn't realize was like that corner of the cabinet is digging into your back at all times. And it could be hours a day because I love doing emergency shutoff valves. Well, my back's jacked up there now. It's like there's nothing you can do about that. It's just like part of the game. And then you have traffic, and then you have a dispatcher yelling at you, and your manager's disappointed in you, and your wife's pissed because you're going to be out late today. Not because you made a fortune, but because you were almost home, and that call you ran this morning that's an hour and 10 minutes away from your house, you forgot to turn their hot water heater back on. Oh, and by the way, they're seniors, and they don't go out or they don't go down into the basement. Like, I got to drive back out. And like everybody's upset. This is life in a service truck. And you get berated by clients and there's good days, there's bad days, but the bad days just tend to kind of outweigh the good days. And if you're not, this is another Brian Tracy analogy that I really lived with for the last 20 years. Your mind is your backyard, essentially. And I'm in Arizona, so we don't have grass here. But if you're in a place where they have grass in the spring, summer, and fall, like, if you just let that yard go, it's going to be full of crabgrass and dandelions. But if you go out there and you weed it, and you put weed and feed down, and you aerate it maybe once a year, every other year, or whatever, and overseed it, you're going to have a beautiful yard with exactly what you want in it. But if you just let it go, what grows in it is not going to be beautiful. It's going to be horrible. And our mind is the exact same thing. And it's 10 times worse in the trades, I believe, than most other jobs. There's toxic stuff in every gig, no question about it. But the pain to pleasure ratio in the home services it's pretty skewed toward pain. And we can get so negative. And if you want to see a version of that, you just hop on any of the plumbing, HVAC, electrical Facebook groups that are techs, not necessarily owners, and watch how they act. It's negative. It's miserable. It's tearing each other down. It's nothing's really funny except when somebody's getting obliterated. And if you throw a picture of a girl in a bikini in there, it's going to be the most liked thing. It's like, it's just dopamine, negativity, fear, anxiety. And it's skewed heavily toward the pain part. And we're not gardeners, man. Like, most of us didn't have dads and come from horrible backgrounds. And like, we've not been given the tools to facilitate a beautiful yard in our mind. Waste No Day is supposed to be that for the techs, which is why you and I were talking before about the fact that we don't do any sponsors for Waste No Day. When part of it is, like, I don't want to take up that time. Part of it's just, frankly, that I don't want to take up the time. And people try to get on the show constantly. I mean, I don't know. We're probably getting 20 to 50 people trying to get on the show every week. And the answer is no for nearly all of them. I mean, rarely does someone reach out to me that I bring on the show. It's very rare. And the issue with that is I only get 52 times a week to talk to these guys. So your message needs to be pretty good. Now, I want it to help them make more money. That's primary goal. But we've brought on, like, George Camel of Dave Ramsey's show, and fitness people, and diet people, and guy who wrote some books on keto carnivore. And we want it to be all encompassing to make people better people, to make people have a happier life, which is, the reason we had Jocko Willink on. Like, that better life comes at the expense of discipline. Like, it just is what it is. If you want to feel better, eat better. If you want more energy, work out. I know, counterintuitive. It just is what it is, right? But we only get 52 times a year that we get to have these conversations. So we're pretty protective. And people do not like to be told no for these kind of things, which sucks because I don't like to tell people no for this kind of thing. It's like, I'm not trying to be selfish, but it's got to be twofold, man. It's got to really benefit the people listening, and it's got to help grow the show. And if you just want to come on and sell your product, it's like, I don't think that does either. Unfortunately, I know it's your product, so it's just going to help the world, and these guys will all be better off with it. But the fact that you make money off of everyone sold kind of skews that a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't even remember what topic we were on, but
it's fine.
But yeah, Waste No Day is built to be this, to pull us back toward center as technicians in the truck. So we're in your passenger seat. I always hope, like, you know, I drove around listening to tapes by Brian Tracy and all those guys back in the day. And to an extent, there are times that I can look back on times when I was in a service truck 20 years ago where I was having a rotten day and something cool happened on one of these tapes that really sunk in for me. And it felt like Brian Tracy just made my day better. Tom Hopkins just made my day better. Jim Rohn, whatever. And when I look back on it now, they weren't in the tape player. They were there with me. Like, they were with me in that truck. Like, Dr. Robert Cialdini took rides from call to call with me in Las Vegas. Now, he didn't know that, but I was listening to Influence. So there he is. And we just kind of visualize ourselves as like being in the guy's passenger seat of his truck. And when we crack jokes and when we make fun of each other and when we get kind of huffy puffy and like start kind of yelling at the tech, you know, we might be talking to someone specifically, just kind of, you know, without saying it. Oftentimes I'm just yelling at, like, I see young me. I'm visualizing a 25-year-old me and thinking, like, what did I need to hear? Oh, here's what I needed to hear. And I'm like yelling because I'm like, stop being an idiot, you know? But we visualize ourselves in that truck with some faceless technician and hope that everyone listening to that show every week feels like we're in that passenger seat with them, and they're hopefully adding a level of accountability, entertaining them, but certainly making them smarter and giving them the tools to weed and aerate and overseed their backyard so that they have a beautiful lawn to really carry them through what's going to be a rough day most of the time.
You mentioned many forms of addiction earlier, and I think this is a great question for you because you've lived it and experienced it. How do you harness the energy or like brain power that goes into addiction and translate that, whatever you want to call it, turn it into focus and obsession and desire for something greater?
That's a great question. I've definitely had this conversation about this thing being a phenomenon that exists. I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me how. And I don't know that I have the answer. I actually think it's probably more of a natural occurrence than anything. It's just, this is why the worthwhile goal is talked about so much in those circles of the people, the audiobooks I just mentioned, because when you find that thing that means as much to you as that video game or that needle or that handful of pills or that bottle, you will just naturally do it. Like, that energy is just there in all of us, particularly 20-year-old broken young men who had no dad to guide them. Young me. The energy's already there. We just never had anyone point it in the right direction for us. Like, you know, we talk trash about guys who had a good upbringing and both parents and like a little bit of money. Who's this silver spoon? It's like, I don't even know anybody like that. I couldn't name one person like that. You know, I barely think that person even exists. But what we really mean is like the advantage that person had was just a father to guide him and say, don't do that. Do this. Here's what's going to happen if you keep on with this behavior. Here's what's going to happen if you change over to this behavior, right? Watch this. And things I do with my son, like, do this for the rest of this month, right? And no more of this, just for the rest of this month. And on March 1st, you tell me if you want to go back. Like, I can't even imagine having a conversation like that with a grown man when I was 17. I cannot even fathom that. So there is no guidance for those guys. And if you ended up in plumbing truck at 17, 18, that's probably where you came from. I mean, the odds are like the amount of people I know in the trades who have that background is overwhelmingly that. Overwhelmingly. So having somebody guide you initially is probably the best how to channel that energy, because addicts don't have special energy. Now, if you're getting ready to be dope sick, and I've been there, and you need to score before you get there, you got some energy. Like you're that lady that's going to lift the car off the kid. Like you'll find extra energy there. But for the most part, the aggression and the assertiveness and the wit and the brain power that goes into an addict getting drugs, it's in all of us. We just don't engage it enough because we don't have anything that we really desire or feel that strongly about. So if you want to channel it, whether you've been an addict or not, start figuring out your why. What's your worthwhile goal? Start writing that down in detail. And here's the problem, unfortunately, for the vast majority of people that will ever hear this. Having a big house and a nice car is not it. Like, I don't mean you don't want it. You want it. I understand that. I didn't live in a house that was owned by someone with my last name until 2013 when I was in my 30s. I had never lived in an owned, I mean, every house I lived in with my mom, it was rented apartments, and then we rented, and then just one to another to another. I want to own a nice house, and I want a nice ride. I'm not a big car guy, but I want a decent car, and my wife likes nice cars, so I want her to have a nice car. Like these things exist for us, right? But it would have never been enough for me to set me on the path that I'm on. Now, growing up in Southwest Detroit and watching people die and narrowly escaping with my life and becoming an addict primarily because of things that happened in Detroit and not coping with that and dealing with that stuff, and now having kids, my why is so powerful because I always feel like we're one misstep away from those 4 kids having to live in Detroit. And you know, it's actually a better place than it was when I was a kid, so it wouldn't be the worst thing now. But to me, internally, it's the worst thing that could happen. So having this thing behind me where I'm always one financial mistake away from them growing up where I did, that's power. Now, if you don't have that and you don't have kids, all right, what is it? Now, I help people come up with their why. I will do that for people. But the better life you have starting out, I know, silver spoon and everything, the more difficult it is. If you're not running from something, you have to figure out something to run to. And that is much more difficult than running from.
How important is sales just in life? Not just like selling products for money, but the ability to communicate a message effectively so that someone either, you know, quote unquote converts, becomes a customer, becomes a fan, becomes a follower. How
Yeah. We're moving into the communication realm, right? How, for those listening, how important is it that you're not wishy-washy with your message? That every other word you say isn't like like, come on, yeah, like
feel like
is that how you want to sound? It's the first year and a half of Waste No Day, believe me. What's with the attacks, bro?
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, the question is this what you want to sound and look like? Or do you want to be an effective communicator? When you speak, people start listening. You're articulate. Man, it's another Jordan Peterson thing. It's like that person is unstoppable. They're going to do whatever they want. And, you know, you look at somebody like a Ben Shapiro, right? Regardless of where you fall on his politics, if you go up to have a conversation where you're gonna, give him what for, you're gonna show him, and you haven't prepared like you're going to defend yourself in murder court and you didn't do it, he is going to cut you to pieces.
Yeah.
And he does it to people all the time who are 20 years older and way more educated than him. He literally leaves chunks of them all over the floor. What can't that guy do with that level of communication? I believe, call it sales, call it communication, negotiation skills, whatever, the ability to walk into a room and get the attention of anyone you want and hold it for as long as you want. And even more, to make them feel any emotion you want at any time and then bring them back out of it, is the most powerful force you can have. And it's been used for all sorts of bad and good, right? I mean, the leaders of World War II, you had a time when, like, Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin were all alive. And then the generals, like Patton, for crying out loud, all these generals too. And dang, I can't remember his name. The British guy, Neville Chamberlain. But all these, all these underling guys, and Nikita Khrushchev, and like these amazing captive speakers who convinced nations to do some of the most horrible things ever imagined by way of their communication skills. It's insane to me. I've watched more hours of World War II documentaries, I'm ashamed to say, than my daughter's growing up. Like, not even close. It's by a mile.
It's fascinating stuff.
One of the fascinating, well, the main reason I think I like it and it intrigues me is, like, I love that you would have a general. You'll watch one episode and you see the generals getting together and they're talking about taking this bridge in German occupied France 18 months from now. Like, not tomorrow morning, but like a year and a half from now. And a year and a half later to the day, they send the exact force they talked about and it happens. And you're just like, and the scale of this thing as they show the globe now, like these World War II in color documentaries, like, I talk to dudes, my son being one of them, every now and then, and I'm like, no, bro, let's just watch this a little bit. Let's get into it. And it's like, this stuff's boring, man. I'm like my respect for you is just, it immediately vanishes. You started back at zero. I'm like, how can you not get into this?
My girlfriend hates when I love watching World War II documentaries. And
yeah, I was going to leave the fairer sex out of this conversation because it's not something they enjoy thoroughly. But that's okay. They're wired differently. But when you're a dude and you say that, I'm like,
yeah, there's something wrong with you.
You're wired differently. So, yeah, these aside from just the vastness of this, because the cool thing about these new color docs is, like, I've been watching them. I watched them for decades when it was black and white, and now you see these guys coming out of these concentration camps in color, and you're like, are you what? Like, it was never that real when it was black and white, and now all of a sudden, there's rarely footage that comes out that I haven't seen before, but in, like, I don't know, probably like around 2018, 2016, they started remaking them in HD color, and I'm seeing all these things in color, and it's just like, oh, like, this freaking could have been my uncle or something. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But the level of communication of the speakers who made all these things happen, and forgetting about the atrocities and, like, whether it's good or bad, like, people had to be sold to get involved to go fight these monsters over there. And they were sold by high level communicators. You watch these guys, the way they master hundreds of thousands of people. by their communication. It's like, is there any more important skill in the world? Is there anything even close? And I mean, for you personally, the listener, for you, Will, for myself, just to master, is there any skill even close to that level of importance? As you become a greater communicator, you also get more and more difficult to deceive. There is a direct correlation to that. So if I learn seductive arts in the arts of like deception, 48 Laws of Power by Dr. Robert Greene is this freaking amazing book. It's like, it's a hard read because it's very dark. And he and 50 Cent wrote another one called The 50th Law. But it's a difficult read because it's so deceptive. And I'm in a place, there was a time when I could have read that and really loved it. But I'm in a place in my life where I've kind of, for the most part, like righted the wrongs that I've committed in my addiction and insanity. And I don't walk in that way anymore. And to read these things just kind of reminds me of a former version of me. And it's a tough read, but it's a necessary read. I think it's a great book. It's a long read. I think it's like 27 hours audiobook. But it's all stories, man. It's a great time. But, there's just one story in it, all right? Philip the 11th, the Spider King, he was known as, had an astrologer. And this was like his guy, like his favorite person in the court, the king's court. And the astrologer comes up to him one day and he says, in 7 days, one of the women of court is going to die. And 7 days later, one of King Philip the 11th's court women passes. And he meets with his other advisors and he says, man, either he's so powerful that he made it happen, or he's so treacherous that he poisoned her or something just so it would happen to gain my favor. Either way, this guy's got to go, right? So he tells his guards, I'm going to bring him up to this room. I'm going to have a quick chat with him. We're up on the 15th floor of the castle or whatever. And when I give you the nod, chuck him out that window. So the astrologer comes walking in. Now, he comes walking in. If he's not sharp, if he just lets life happen and he's not on his game and he doesn't understand body language and he doesn't notice that these guards are on their tippy toes, not on their heels, and that they're corner eyeing him, not looking straight forward like they usually do when he's with the king. And that King Philip the 11th looks a little nervous. If he doesn't notice these things, he's going to miss his window. And what's his window? Pardon the pun. The king says, you're very astute at foretelling the future. Let me ask you, trusted astrologer, tell me your fate. When do you die? And the astrologer, looking around, guaranteed, right? Understanding body language and facial expressions, sees the way the guards are positioned and can tell from his eyes probably that the king has lost favor in him. Looks back at the king and says, why, your majesty, your servant dies 3 days after yourself. Guess what? He didn't go out the window that day. He actually got the best doctors in the kingdom to see to his health for the rest of his life, and he outlived the king.
Wow.
I don't know if that's legend or true story or what, but
That's a good story, and you're a good storyteller.
Thank you.
I'm still on the edge of my seat.
He didn't. If you really think about, like, this story was told in that book in kind of the art of like deception and understanding people. But I'm a student of body language and communication. So what did I hear? So I'm picturing this story in my head. And when the narrator's telling the story, he's telling it from the point of view of the king being crafty and getting ready to chuck this guy out the window. All I see is how the guards' feet are positioned and whether they're leaning back on their spear like they normally do, or whether they're just kind of hunched forward and looking at me like they mean business. And I know these looks because I grew up in a place where there were hostile people who meant me harm, oftentimes.
Are you still there? Oh, there you are.
I got booted.
I have no
Right
clue.
here. Well, my recording's starting over at least, so I guess you just cut that piece together.
Yeah, mine says we're still running, so we should be good.
Okay. Yeah, and I forget where I left off.
You were talking about how, like, when you were growing up, you could see different people and, like, if they were in a hostile kind of stance or whatnot.
Yep. But hearing the story, and I'm just listening to an audiobook, I heard it in such a way that how the guards were looking at me made me feel uneasy. Oh my God, the king's about to have me killed. I need to come up with something quick here. Right? And that's what he did. Because of his communication skills, he was able to read the communication, the gestures of everyone around him and realize I'm in danger. So is the ability to sell important? The ability to communicate is the most important skill we will ever develop.
So how do you develop it? How have you, aside from like growing up in environments where it's almost like survival of the fittest, you have to pick up on these little subtle cues to not get like mugged or robbed.
Yeah, and that's a real thing, but unfortunately, that doesn't make people high-level communicators. It tends to go the opposite way. When I first got to my mentor in Las Vegas when I was 24 in 04, I was a nervous, shy wreck. I wasn't looking people in the eyes. I was looking down. I was sagging my pants, for crying out loud. It was bad, man. I was a wreck, but he saw something in me and said, we're going to get it out. Now, there are things that he did, and we talked about this on the show many times. He made me do little tasks and missions, like we're at a restaurant eating lunch and he would say, find out what city the waiter grew up in and if his parents are still together. And I'm like, huh? And you go, oh, no, not our waiter. That waiter back there. Like, now I got to do it to somebody who's not even serving us, right? And the most corny pieces of information. It's difficult. And what he would say all the time is what I said earlier. I would get the information. I would humiliate myself sometimes. And I would realize I did not die in the pursuit of this info. And my skin got thicker. And I started figuring out ways to get to the information faster. And I started finding that if somebody clearly was bothered by having a conversation with me, I could use gratitude. I could use humor, self-deprecating mostly, to break that ice and completely ruin that barrier that's between us. It just shatters the wall. Like, it goes away. Gratitude, genuine gratitude, not like, hey, thanks, appreciate it. But like real, man, I really appreciate what you're doing for me here, man. This means a lot to me. Just want to say thank you. You know, oftentimes I say in the boot camps, it's not gratitude if it doesn't have a story attached to it. So like if I'm doing plumbing at your house, I can walk up to the door and say, hey, Will, man, just want to thank you for using Ben Franklin Plumbing today. I know there's like 1,000 companies in town, so the fact that you're using us means a lot to me. Thank you. Right? Kind of pay to play. It's more than what most companies do. They just say, "Hey, thanks for calling us." But did you feel it? It doesn't reach out and grab you, right? So what would? Well, let me attach a story to it. Hey, man, I'm a third generation plumber. My uncles taught their nephews who were uncles that taught me, right? 3 generations of plumbers. One day, I'm looking forward to the possibility that my now 17-year-old son will gear up, uniform up, hop in the driver's seat of a plumbing truck, and go run his first call. Which would be a very proud moment for me. And he will only get to do that the same way I only get to do this because of people like you calling us out. And I just want to tell you that I appreciate it. Right? Gratitude with a story. You did this, man. You're the reason that I get to do this thing that I love, and my son will do this one day. And like, right? So you just make a story, whatever that story is. I could have just told you, hey, my son might be a plumber one day. That'd be pretty cool. Right? That's not a story. That's just a statement. No matter how you got into this trade, and we sit here and role play this at boot camp, and we make everyone who comes on that stage to role play the gratitude piece, come up with a story. But it's their story. They just don't look at it like it's anything cool because it's theirs. But I ask them 3 questions on that stage, and then I turn it into a story, a true story, their real story, and deliver it the way I just did. And the whole room's like, wow. And then the dudes will be like, damn, bro, I didn't know. Yeah, I do have a great story, right? Like, no, you don't, unless you deliver it that way. It's all in the communication, all of it.
So when you're trying to figure out this like obscure information on waiters and other various people that you're running into, how do you like initially make that contact or connection? What do you start?
Dude, when you're like your age, how old are you?
24.
24. Okay. This is the age I like to hire people. Give me like 19 to 26 at the latest and let me go to work and just really, it's such a crucial age. It's like you can be at your most awkward, your most terrified, your least purposed and least productive right now because the world expects something out of you for the first time in your life. And if you're not delivering, you feel crushed by that weight. So it's my obligation to help put you on a path where you're going to start delivering. It might be a couple years from now, whatever, but you're going to see a clear path to a clear goal. So I love this age. But you're not a master communicator at 20 at the age of 24 and in 2025. It's never been tougher. Because even now, we're having a great conversation, looking at each other through a screen. You might not be wearing pants right now. I would have no idea. I'm not wearing pants, for the record. I actually do this often. I'll be in the Waistode a polo with boxer shorts on recording the podcast. I do it. The studio's in my bedroom, so why wouldn't I, you know? I tell Nate, keep it up. I'm going to drop the camera, bro. So for you and for me doing it at 24, when I got to my mentor, it was like these long drawn out processes where I'm like trying to come up with cool stories or something that is effective because I'm horrified to do this. 2 years in, I wish I could say I was like, I'm lazy, bro. Like at the end of the day, I'm looking for the path of least resistance like we all are. I'm just going up and going. Excuse me. Waiter, what's your name? Go ahead, role play it with me. What's your name, sir?
Oh, Will.
Hey, good to meet you, Will. Let me ask you 2 questions real quick. You got a quick sec? I won't take much time.
Yeah, of course.
What city did you grow up in?
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Harrisburg. That's awesome. Are your parents still together?
Yeah.
Good. Appreciate your time, man. Sorry to bother you. And I just walked the hell away. Like, but it took a long time because in the beginning, man, I'm like, oh, hey, so I have a school paper to fill out for my college. You know, I'm like making up shit and like it makes no sense. And I'm and I look super nervous and people are kind of have this like, get the hell away from me, like look on their face. So in the beginning, it was a long drawn out process of trying to come up with a way every single time.
That's where my mind was going. I was like, I'm
right.
Naturally.
Yeah. And as good as Lance was at this stuff, he wasn't that good. He hadn't done this with anyone before, and he was kind of a prick, so he wanted me to struggle. So go figure it out, bro. But over time, I just realized people are built to comply. So if I walk up to people and act like my wife hates this. I do this thing all the time. Like we got the JW Marriott down the street from us. Beautiful resort. I don't know, like 6 pools and lazy rivers and like infinity hot tubs and these huge water slides the kids love. And we'll stay there. We stay there once in a while, like a couple times a year. But when we do, we get the wristbands to go into the pool area, right? And it's like $60 a day per person to go into the pool area. Well, I'd get the wristbands and just leave them a little long and bring them home. And when I want to take the girls swimming, I just put the wristbands on and we go walk in. And first time she does it with me, she's just like, what if they ask us if we're staying there? I'm like, they're not going to. Like, I'm not going to lie to them, but they're not going to. Well, how do you know? Because I'm going to walk up in there like my last name's Marriott. I'm going to fist bump any dude that works there that's like checking wristbands and be like, hey, man, how's the day going? It's a little hot out here, bro. Where's your umbrella? I'm going to chat with them, but I'm going to act like I own this place, and they're going to believe that I own this place.
Yeah.
And guess what? Every single time it works. And I don't know why. Maybe it's the mischievous punk kid in me that just won't die. I love doing stuff like that. I just love it. It's as far as I'll push, you know, like I'm not going.
Sounds like the construction vest. Like people just walk into like,
yeah, exactly.
You know, areas you shouldn't be in just because they have like a high vis vest on.
Yeah, a hard hat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the answer is you just go do it. Don't pussyfoot around and overthink it and like get emotional. Go take it. Go take the information.
Yeah.
Now, you should leave start and end with some gratitude. Hey, man, I really apologize to bother you. I'm going to take a quick sec. Get the info. They're like, yep. Like, hey, stick the hand out, stick the fist out, whatever. Really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing that for me. Yeah, you're welcome. Cool. And you just walk away. Like I've never been asked. Not one time. It's the weirdest thing.
Now, is that any different at a networking event? How you approach people, how you extract information, the kind of information you're looking for?
No, not at all. There's no difference whatsoever. Like as soon as you start asking people questions like that, we're just basically going to comply. There's like 1% of the population that is probably a touch sociopathic that isn't built to comply and will just push back on everything. Here's the problem. If I give you a mission like this at 24 and you start getting out in the world and doing these things to build your armor, and the first one you run into is that dude, you're giving up. You're just going to go, that's how people are. This is why you need a mentor. Because your mentor needs to say, nope, that was an asshole and they exist, but the majority of people are not them. So let's do it 5 more times. 5 more times. And let's see what the average was. And the next 4 people you do it to are 100% compliant and really nice people. And if they think they're helping you, they love it. They love to help people out. We love to help. Except that one dude. I don't know what he loves. It's not people. So you would just do it. You'd get that repetition and realize that the majority of times this works very well. And then you start taking it into the home. And one thing we have our apprentices do here is like, you have to go to a grocery store in town called Sprouts. Sprouts is where people with a little bit more money grocery shop, right? We're not going to Aldi's. We want homeowners. So, so we send them into Sprouts and we'll say, go up to everyone you see and say, hey, I'm Brian with Waste No Day Plumbing, and I'm just conducting a little survey. They're in uniform, so conducting a little survey. And I just wanted to find out, how do you guys treat the water that you drink at home? Now, I fully expect that somebody's going to get kicked out of Sprouts for this at some point. Has not happened yet. But the people at Sprouts are like super nice. The people that work there, they hire very nice people there. So they're a little bit compliant too. So the techs will go in and do it. And we've booked jobs from it. We've booked estimates. We've gotten 5-star Google reviews from people just that loved our techs at the gas station or Sprouts. And then we have days when we're slow where I'll just say, everyone Go to the gas stations or wherever you're going and get some business on the board. Ask people how they treat their water. And it's these very uncomfortable situations and moments where you have to go out there. And I give scripts. So I'm like, here's exactly what you say. Takes the guesswork out. And that's the most painful part. If you give somebody a script, it's pretty easy. And they get rejected occasionally, but it's not harsh. And I want it to be harsh. Like I want the door slammed in the face harsh. Now come on back to the shop and let's have a chat about it. And we'll clean the wounds and bandage you up and just let you know you didn't die. Yeah. You don't even know. You just got tougher. Like the next one's going to hurt a lot less. And then 20, 30 painful ones after that, you don't even feel it anymore. It doesn't even affect you. It's like, oh, on to the next one. Oh, on to the next one. It's gut punch in the beginning, but you get over it. So the longest answer of a question ever, how you get better is you practice, just like that.
Heck yeah. I want to be respectful of your time. Are you able to keep going?
I'm 1 minute over.
All right. No worries. I definitely want to talk to you again, man. This was like, I don't know. You're a very cool dude.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
A lot of money spent on me becoming cool because it didn't start there.
So where can people find more about you? Where do you want to send people to? What's your thing?
Waste No Day. Like Waste No Day podcast. It's on all the platforms. If you enjoy it, please leave us a review. If you enjoy Will's show, like if you got one thing out of this episode, one thing, just go over. If it's Spotify, click the 5-star button. If it's Apple, mention it. Say it like, hey, this was a great piece of advice. This was a great nugget. He's had 9 great people on this show before me. So 100%, if you get something out of it, let them know in the reviews. This is what builds a show. And last I checked, they're free. So you ain't paying anything to listen to it.
Thank you so much. And how can people find about your boot camp?
On wastenoday.com. So right now, I think there's no, it just says register for boot camp. Just check it every now and then. When the next one goes live, it'll open. And then once it goes live, I'll also mention it on the beginning of the shows.
Perfect. Awesome, man. Dude, thank you so much. This was a great
my pleasure, bud. Great talking to you, Will.